For the majority of my life, it's been told to me and largely implied that I had a much easier life simply because I was the youngest. This has had some very negative effects on my life that I've only begun to just now begin to see. Self-discovery is a very worthwhile venture that often leaves us profoundly aware that we are incredibly complicated. And while it is safe to say that each sibling has their particular set of woes, in this video, we're gonna look at some of the particular ones that plague us as the youngest. And this video would be completely obnoxious if there was no form of disclaimer at the front, letting you guys know that this is a completely subjective video and a subjective topic, meaning that it's personalized to me and these are experiences that I have had, and so they're not necessarily universal. And while some of these things may resonate with you or they may not, just keep that in mind that we're not trying to label people here or put them in boxes. I'm just simply sharing my experience and just kind of throwing it out in the dark to see if anything bounces back to me. And if you've seen some of my other videos on this topic, then you'll know that this is a very complicated subject. And so I want to approach it carefully. First, we're going to talk about identity and how who we are or who we think we are largely affects our life and affects our reactions to things and our behavior and our habits and our disciplines, a lot of things. Combined with the stereotypes of us as the youngest, radically change and shift the way that we perceive the world. Hopefully I can explain the complexity of this in a way that makes sense. Why do human beings go to such extreme lengths to protect their identity? Well, a lot of this comes back to a very, very simple, fundamental piece of our existence, and that is that everything must have an identity. Because if you can't name something and identify it as something, our brain pretty much concludes that it doesn't exist. And so therefore, we naturally give an identity to everything that we interact with. And if we don't do this consciously, it will happen unconsciously, which means that oftentimes the labels that our brain can put are very unproductive and can actually be straight up wrong and can lead us astray in many ways. And this identity of who we are will radically change our behavior. And then within this identity is something that I call a baseline reality. It's the baseline that we return to no matter what. And if we can't learn to address that baseline and shift it and change it consciously, then change will not be very long term. It will only last for a short amount of time until we gradually get pulled back into what is our normal level of behavior, into what we are comfortable with. For example, if your baseline is sitting on the couch eating potato chips because that's comfortable for you, if you force yourself to go work out, just by sheer willpower, most likely before that becomes an actual habit, you will be pulled back to your baseline, to what you feel like is comfortable. And within all of this is the narrative that we give our life. We tell our life in a story, and we will find a story to support our identity and our baseline. And the story that we tell ourselves is really powerful because it backs up or can change what we believe about ourselves. So why does this all matter? Well, when you get older, you begin to learn how to shape the story you tell yourself manually. Okay, so for example, you may be driving, your car breaks down. One person says, "Oh my word, God hates me, he is punishing me by breaking down my car." The next person looks at the exact same thing, has the exact same scenario, but the story that they tell themselves is, "Whoa, God just gave me a perfect opportunity to learn how to trust him better." So there you have the exact same scenario, everything, but the difference is the story that we tell ourselves. And you'll notice that the story tends to line up with what we believe about ourselves. If a part of your identity is the belief system that you deserve to be punished, don't you think that's gonna change the approach of what story you tell yourself? Well, yeah, obviously, dramatically, it will change it. And so yeah, as we get older, we can do this kind of on purpose. But what about when you're 5 or 10 or 12? It's like during some of the most transformative periods of your life when you are just taking an input, like that's all you're doing. You know, for the first 7 or 8 years of your life, you are only taking and receiving in input of a lot of things. You're building your framework of reality. You're building your world and your reality. And then as you get older in the teens, you kind of go through another transformative period where you become your own person. You stretch out your reality and your identity and you decide where you are at. And so if during that period of transformative change of defining your reality and defining your belief systems of the world and of you, what if during that period, you've been told over and over and over and shown repeatedly that you are spoiled, that when you achieve something, you didn't actually have to work as hard for it, or that you're more privileged than your older siblings? How do you think that that knowledge of your identity that someone else is placing on your life affects you. You see where I'm going with this, right? So like, again, let me shift to speak more about my experience. So for me, I didn't believe those stories. The things that my siblings were saying, oh, you're spoiled, oh, you didn't have to. In my mind, that was not true, especially as I got into my teenage years. But because of that, it made me feel like I was not understood, and that my hard work or whatever I thought I was doing or whatever I thought deserved validity, because I wasn't receiving that in my mind, then resentment built up. And so this laid the foundation for many, many negative belief systems. It did shape my identity. It shaped the way that I defined myself and who I believed I was and what I could become and accomplish. And because of this, I learned to stop voicing my opinions and my achievements and to sort of just like close up on myself, especially around my family, because my brain was like, whoa, not safe. Like, don't go there. And so I closed in on myself and slowly began to become only comfortable when I was with myself deep inside. Now, why is that? Why does this happen? Well, I think it happens because stereotypes are formed out of the story we tell ourselves. And so it felt like the people around me kind of built an identity for who they thought I was and the baseline that I had. And then they found a story to back that up. And so then as I got older, I began kind of forming my own identity of like who I was, what I was interested in, what I wanted to do, my pursuits, my interests, all of these things. And they didn't really line up. And this is not my family's fault necessarily. This is just kind of the way things happen sometimes in life. My response was very clearly to find people that did agree with of who I thought I was, my identity. And so I turned to YouTubers and vloggers and, Peter McKinnon, Casey Neistat, and like gamers and things like that I could resonate with, who had similar drives. What was born out of that was this frantic, desperate sprint to try to prove to everybody around me that I am a different person than what you think I am. And I'm gonna prove it to you. And it was not healthy because I just like lurched forward and promptly fell flat on my face. Total disaster. The whole disproving it thing didn't work. So I was like, oh, well, this is great. So I just kind of closed in and started building this person without showing other people. And it felt kind of like if I would have shown who I really was, like my true self, if I'd have just like been myself, then it felt like that wouldn't have lined up with who my family thought I was. That is partly my fault because I wasn't comfortable doing that and trying to show them because I felt like it was scary and I was like, I'm not gonna do that. And so it kind of felt like if I would have shown that, then my family would have been like, whoa, who's this person? Like that you're not Austin. Like, what's going on here? And then it would have felt like my progress and stuff wouldn't have been validated. And a friend of mine said something that just beautifully sums this up. He's also the youngest. And one thing he said is, don't treat me like a knockoff when all I'm trying to do is change and become someone different. He said, if you don't let me change and be myself, you're pushing me away. And you make it weird to be myself. And I could not agree with that more. Very, very accurate to my experience. Like I felt the weirdest being myself with the people that knew me the best. And it kind of felt like I was constantly like bucking up against this like identity that they had built around me. And like I said, identities are formed unconsciously most of the time. It's not like they decided to believe these things about me. It happens because everything in our life, we have to give it an identity because it has to fit in a framework somehow. Because if things didn't, then our life would be pure chaos. The lenses we view the world through, or the story that we tell, will often align with our identity as a way of just simply preserving it because we try to protect it. It's valuable to us, even though we don't really think about it. And this is, side note, but this is what happens when people get really, really dogmatic in an argument. They don't even care if like they're right or wrong. They just like, they have to win. It's because what they're arguing about, they've linked to their identity. And so if it is not true, then it is as if a piece of them is not true. And that's how self-fulfilling prophecies can happen, where it's like, you don't believe that you're a person who works out, and you go start working out and you're like, well, if I just force myself to do it, then I'll get through it and I'll realize it's okay. Probably not actually. Probably you'll do it for a week and your brain is like, this sucks. Like, this is terrible. And your brain's like, see, I told you, working out is terrible. It's awful. The only people that do it are rude and angry, and so because your identity is over here, your brain will take this experience and weave it around whatever it needs to get it to that point. And that's something we need to be aware of, and that's a lot of what's happening, I think, with youngest siblings. And that's kind of what I'm trying to illustrate here, is that I think many times when in our very young years, our identity is built around us. And we either buck against that and try to fight our way out and feel very penned in, or we adopt it, which is even worse and even more scary. But that's why I think the story and stereotypes and things that we have to be so careful with that. Based on your experience and little things, gestures that happen, if you are primed to think that you are simply riding on the backs of your siblings to success versus that the world is full of opportunity and then you are celebrated when you take advantage of that opportunity, those are radically different. And don't you think that you're gonna end up perceiving the world and opportunity and take risks and view achievement and everything? Don't you think it's gonna be so different based on these two different ways that you could be primed in your growing up years? Absolutely, it's gonna be totally different. And it's just really scary to kind of think about these things because this happens. And it has a large effect on the risks you take and the people you talk to and the things that you can achieve and what you believe about yourself and so many of these different things. And in my personal opinion, this is kind of what stereotypes do. They preload our view for how we experience and see the world, I think. So whether you're the youngest or not, there's a few things I want to leave with you. Number one, how do you identify yourself? What is your identity? What is your baseline of reality that you return to? And more importantly, what is the story that you are telling yourself to reinforce your identity? Because you can change your story. And Tony Robbins says, change your story and you'll change your life. And I wholeheartedly agree. So that's the first thing. Your story, it shapes your identity. So grasp a hold of that and take conscious control. And along with that, step outside of your baseline regularly. And again, comfort zone is the best place to do this most likely and the most common way, because it shapes and changes the way you perceive the world in a really good way. So that's the second thing. Lastly, begin your day proactively. I found that having a routine that grounds you in your day makes you more proactive, and so that you're not just reacting to what life throws at you through your day. And so the way you begin your day oftentimes will determine how you end it. And something I like to say is your mind is one of the most precious parts of who you are. Don't let just anything wander in there. Very practically, I don't look at my phone for the first hour that I wake up, because I don't need other people's agenda and things being laid on me before I even design my own. So if you want more info on this whole topic, check out the video in the dead center of the screen here where I discuss a little bit more in depth and a little bit more personally what it feels like to be the youngest child. Also, if you're interested, I recently designed a survey for people that are the youngest, where they can go and share their experience of what it's like in different scenarios and situations. And so I ask a whole bunch of questions on there of how would you respond in this situation? Or what would you think if someone said this to you? And it's all just for research purposes. It's all anonymous, obviously. None of your information will be shared. But then it just helps people see a little bit better the reality of what it feels like to be the youngest, which is something I'm very passionate about. So go check that out. It's linked down in the description. I would love to get your opinion and your perspective.